Ozzie, I know it's an exciting time of the year for you and really an exciting past couple of months. You're a guy that likes to stay out of the spotlight to some extent, but when you go to the Super Bowl and you win a Super Bowl, you're on the biggest stage in sports. How has winning that game really affected your life over the past couple of months?
Well, it really made things a little faster for me. Normally, over the past 2 or 3 years in losing in the AFC Championship game, you had 2 or 3 weeks to get myself together before our draft meetings, before I had to go down to competition committee meetings, and before the owners meeting. But in winning the Super Bowl, I lost those weeks. So I've had to speed some things up, but I think in that I have a whole lot of trust in the guys that work with me, and with John, it has made it a lot easier.
You answer from a football perspective. What about you personally? How has that impacted you as an individual?
Well, I've been congratulated by a few people along the way. A lot of the people that kind of felt bad for us, the way we lost to New England a year ago with the drop pass, are the same people that are coming back and saying, hey, good job, you finally made it. So a little redemption. And it's been fun in a sense, but also it's a little taxing in the sense that you did it and you get that taste in your mouth and you want to do it again.
How important is this draft, the one that's coming up, in rebuilding and reloading the roster? Obviously, competing in 14, 15, and 16. How important is the draft coming up?
Well, it's very important. I mean, every draft kind of sits on its own, but this one is very important in the sense is we're starting to build a good nucleus of young players. And we need to have an influx of other young players out of this draft to fit in with that group that's now going to be 3, 2, and 1 years. And so you can have a zero group of guys that'll be in this draft. And I think what it does is sets this franchise up for the next 4 or 5 years to be very competitive.
A lot of people are saying this. One person is John Elway, who recently said that there's not a huge difference in kind of the middle of the round to the end of the first round. The difference between pick 10 is not that different from pick 35. Is that the way you see it? And if that is the way you see it, how does that affect your draft strategy?
Well, I like John. And I finally beat him. After all of those times of him beating me in the AFC Championship game when we were both players. I think, your approach to the draft is you look at it through your team. And I think what John's team is right now, I think that's the way he looks at it. But if we were picking 2 or 3, that'd be a great player for us to pick at that point that would be able to come in and help our football team. But I understand what he's saying. I think the draft runs probably, 50, 60 players where I probably, about 40 of them are right there together, and it's based on, what's your flavor, what do you really need for your team. So I think that's what a lot of people are dealing with. But, being the Kansas City Chiefs with Andy Reid and John Dorsey, who's a really, really good personnel guy, I'm sure they're going to come away with a quality player at the top. And then I'm sure that Jeff Fisher and Les Snead at St. Louis, I think they got 16 and 23. They're sitting there salivating, knowing they're going to be able to get 2 players that's going to be able to help them also.
Mm-hmm. What you have is quantity for sure, 12 picks. Mm-hmm. Is that, I know you love having picks and accumulating picks and using them. Can 12 rookies make the team? Is that more than you need, in other words, going forward?
Well, I never look at a draft thinking every one of my picks are going to make the team. I like to think so, but nobody bats 100% with their draft picks. But will we be able to get some guys that can come in and compete to make the roster or to just be on our practice squad? We're looking to do that. But the advantage of having those picks is we might be able to get the opportunity to trade one of those picks for a pick next year. And that would be huge if we could, take one of our 4th or one of maybe our 3rd and trade that for a 2nd or a 3rd next year, and that all that does is help your 2014 draft.
When you look through kind of the projections and the analysis and the breakdowns of the draft, there's all kinds of, people saying what the needs are for the Ravens. Mm-hmm. What do you think the needs are for this team? Well,
I think you can look at it across the board. I think what we did in free agency has allowed us to free up our draft board. and freeing it up in the sense that, you know what, if we decide we want to go with a third quarterback and then one of those guys slide to us at one of the rounds, then we can take a guy to be our third, because Tyrod is going to his third year. But, offensive line, tight end, receiver, I think, getting the guys that we got allows us to be able to go in and say, well, who is the 32nd best player if all 31 of our guys go? And we can take that player, and he probably can come in and play a significant role for our team this year.
The free agency period was kind of a wild ride, I know, for some of the fans, with some players that left and then some coming, new names coming in. I know you have a plan. Did it work out like you thought it would work out for the most part? And is there luck involved in something like that?
I think luck's involved in everything. But, did some things fall away our way that we probably didn't anticipate when we put our plan together? Yes, it did. To be able for Dumerville to come available, we never would have thought that was going to happen. Michael Huff becoming available, and you talk about getting players like that because our game is changing, and you need to get more athletic guys out on the field, and to be able to get a guy like Michael Huff, who can play corner against us this past year, who's a really good safety, can go out there and match up against the Gronkowskis and the Hernandez and the Gates, but also can play back in the back end. You just don't know how important that is. But so when we put our plan together, we knew what we needed. We didn't know who the names was going to be that was going to fulfill those spots.
You and John Harbaugh have both said that you guys had conversations all the way back to last season saying that this is what was going to happen.
Yes.
What was it that kind of led you to that point and made you feel like we needed to, make some changes on this on the roster moving forward?
Well, I think we don't try to pigeonhole ourselves into, well, we got to keep this team in order to be this good next year. We've learned that with John, Steve, and I working together, is that, okay, we can transition the football team and still be competitive. And so, the salary cap drives a lot of our decisions, the youth of our football team. And when you got, just take the receivers that we have. We got Deontay, we got Tandon Doss, we got Tommy Streeter, and we got David Reed. 4 guys that we've drafted. Well, we need to find out whether those guys can play. And the only way they're going to get the opportunity to play is to get them out on the football field. And now, not having Anquan, those guys get that chance. Hopefully 1 or 2 of those guys are going to emerge. It'd be great if all 4 did. But if 2 of them did, then that will help us to be able to say, okay, we need to sign David going forward, or we need to sign Tandon going forward. But if we don't get a chance to get them on the field and tell me the job is yours to win, then we'll never get the opportunity to be able to provide for those guys to play here in the future.
So much focus on the guys, the new names, the guys that have left, the guys that have come in. Mm-hmm. A guy, maybe your biggest name of a holdover, Terrell Suggs, had an interesting year last year with the injury. He came back. What is the fair expectation for him going forward?
I think that going through that injury, fighting his way back, help mature him as a person, help him grow as a person. He sees a void on our football team of leadership. I think he's going to step right into those shoes and pick those up. I mean, he's served that apprenticeship under Ray and under Ed, and I think he's prepared himself to do that. So I expect Sis to come back and play at the level that he played in 2011, but also provide leadership for us that we need to be able to continue to play defense the way we want to play here in Baltimore.
You've got a leadership void, so to speak, with Ray and Ed leaving. Mm-hmm. But does having a guy like Suggs, and Haloti, does that make you feel like it's not as big of a void as people may think it is?
Well, no. I mean, you can't replace a great leader like Ray Lewis and Ed Reed. They both were off the charts when it came to their leadership ability. But we got guys that have been around. We've got a bunch of guys that have been in that locker room with those guys for 2 or 3 years that saw how they prepare, saw how they practice, saw how they played in games, so they know how they did it. So they already have been led by those guys. And then you take guys like Jamil McClain is another guy, Ladarius Webb. So we got some guys that, that have been sitting in that seat, that have been taking on all of the information from those guys. Now I think they are ready now to put that information into place.
History of the Ravens drafting, you guys have done an amazing job of finding starters not in the first round. I mean, the first round as well with Orr and Grubbs, but also tons of guys going back to Jason Brown, Yonda, a Pro Bowl player. I mean, with left tackle sitting out there, and well, you don't know how it's going to work out exactly, but I mean, what is the secret to finding guys that aren't first round picks that can come in and start for you?
Well, I mean, we use the same standard with picking a third or fourth round pick as we do with our first round. You know, we look for certain characteristics of the player. We look for certain position specifics of the player. So when we get the player in here, he may not be as ready to play as some of the other players, but we think with the coaching that we get out, John and his staff do a great job of developing players that within a year, a Geno can be ready to start, you know, and we see enough in practice. John put those guys through certain paces where they have to realize that they are starters even though they're not starting. And then when that opportunity comes to start, then they're ready to step in. And I think a prime example of that is Geno, who was a fourth-round pick.
Ozzie, we'll get you out of here on this one. You're a guy. The draft is next week. You're a former player. You watch every practice from training camp all the way to the end of the season, and you also love breaking down tape. Is this your favorite part of the year as a general manager?
Well, I was thinking about this when I was working out. I'm probably at the peak. I guess everybody has a peak in their performance. This time of the year, the only thing that's really in my focus is the draft. You know, free agency is passed by. I don't have to deal with any contracts, getting anything done. Most of those are done or put off till after the draft. So right now I can just focus solely on the draft. And our scouts and Joe and Eric and those guys do such a good job of saying, these are the guys you need to look at. So I can sit there and I can watch guys and I really enjoy it. You know, I take one day and I just watch all the offensive linemen, one day all the receivers, one day all the tight ends. And so I can sit there and group them in my own mind. But I enjoy the phone's not ringing a whole lot. You know, the agents are not calling. I mean, the off-season program is going. So things are going at such a pace where I can just focus only on evaluating players, and I can't wait to leave you two guys to go back and start doing it.
All right, well, we'll let you go ahead and do that. Enjoy the peace and quiet and opportunity to just look at the tape. Ozzie, thank you very much for the time.